Fabric scraps and trash seem to be something I've been hoarding a lot of lately, so I thought today I'd combine the two and create some unique DIYs. Hey, it's Donna. I'm happy to have you here today. For this project, I'm using this balsamic vinegar bottle and some cotton fabric along with some burlap scraps, and I'm going to be trimming these scraps down to size to fit on the front side of this bottle. You can see it's a beautiful green colored bottle, and I had removed the label and all the stickiness using some Goo Gone as well as some soap and water. So I'm just going to use my scissors to trim down my burlap fabric first, and then once I have a size that I'm happy with, I'm going to scrunch the material up, and that helps to make the fibers loose so it's easier to fray the edges like you see me doing here. I'm just going to again measure to make sure I've got a good size. I'm going to be using a combination of fabric glue along with my glue gun. I'm going to apply some of the fabric glue to the back of the burlap fabric, and I'm going to use my finger to spread it out, but I'm not going to go all the way to the top or the bottom edge because that's where I'm going to be using my hot glue. So I'm just going to press the fabric down onto the bottle and gently smooth it out. And then using my hot glue gun, I'm adding just a little bit to the bottom and to the top, and that will help to hold the fabric into place. So I really like this casual kind of like farmhouse or maybe even Mediterranean look to this. So I'm going to now just flip it upside down and allow it to dry. Now I'm going to use this cotton fabric scrap that I had. And again, I'm just going to trim it down to size, and it always helps to kind of tear it as well if you're able to. But I don't know, for some reason, sometimes it wasn't working for me tearing it. So I just used my scissors. And then again, I would just scrunch the material up again. And once I have the size that I'm happy with, and again, that will allow me just to remove some of the fibers to give it a frayed edge. I really like that frayed edge look. I just find that it gives kind of more characteristic to the piece. So I would actually love to know, what type of projects do you create using up your fabric scraps? I have done several different projects here on my channel. I'll have those videos linked for you down in the description box, but I'm always curious to know what other people come up with. So let me know down in the comments section. Okay, so as you can see, I'm using my fabric glue again to attach this fabric. Of course, feel free to use any type of glue that you really like to use with your fabric. I know a lot of people like to use Fabri-Tac as well. I just got this particular glue from my local craft store. So my fabric's in place and I allowed it to dry well. Now I'm going to start to decorate this by using some stamps. So I have a collection of some different stamps. I'm also going to be using archival ink. That is a permanent ink. Of course, feel free to use any ink that you have that's a permanent ink. I'm doing a test stamp on a piece of fabric that was in my scraps, and I'm just going to figure out the placement of where I would like my stamped images to be on the front of my bottle. I am using a black ink, but of course you could use a colored ink. That would be really pretty as well. So now I'm just going to see how that looks, and I really like that. Now I do end up adding another little extra embellishment, and or an extra stamp, and I'll show you that in a minute here. But for now, I'm just going to use this stamp. It says Grow and Bloom, and then I've got this beautiful flower stem. And these stamps came from like Michael's, as well as some local dollar stores that are here in my town. Adding this little bumblebee, and then I felt like it still needed a little bit more on the top, so I got this other stamp set that I got in a magazine subscription, and it had a little bee, so I decided to put that at the top, and that filled in the space nicely. I'm using this long strip of cotton fabric that was matching the fabric that was on the front of the jar. It was just a strip that I had, again, in my stash from a previous project. I wanted to see how it would look with it being wrapped around the top of the bottle. And then I also added some jute string, just again for an added little touch that would match the burlap fabric on the front of the bottle. And I was okay with this look. I will show you how it looks here in a minute with some stems, but I felt that maybe it was a little bit too bulky. But again, I just wanted to show you that option if you choose to do that. So here I'm going to show you with the jute twine, just a simple little wrap around just to cover up where the bottle cap screw marks are. So I'm just going to wrap that around again, and then I'm going to tie that off. You can glue this into place as well if you'd like. You could add some ribbon, that would be a pretty touch, or some lace. So I'm just going to tie that off with a simple knot, and then here is what both styles look like. For this next project, I dove into my stash of scrap fabric and I found this beautiful piece that's got these beautiful garden roses, and I'm going to be cutting some strips of about 1.5 inches, and I'm going to just scrunch them up to create a raw edge. Now you'll need several pieces. I love this fabric, it's so beautiful. You'll also need a tin from the recycling bin. This is a literal trash to treasure. So I'm going to be wrapping this tin up with these strips of fabric. You'll need a little dab of glue to start, and then you're going to start to wrap your fabric around. Apply a little bit of hot glue here and there along the way just to help hold your fabric into place. So I'm going to just continue to wrap the fabric around the tin. When you get down to the end, like here, you're going to gently start to bring your fabric down, and then you're going to continue to work around your tin. Once you get down to the bottom, you just want to continue to add your strips of fabric until you've got that bottom edge all covered up. You can trim off the excess and then glue that into place. And then I'm going to flip my tin upside down and trim off all that excess fabric that's on the bottom. And then you can start to decorate the inside. So now I'm going to create a beautiful garden bouquet using some faux florals. These ones are from Dollar Tree, and then I also have some from a store called Dollarama. And what I like to do is just trim down the stems, but I like to separate the wires, and then I just kind of interweave them amongst each other. I don't always cut these pieces apart. I just create a beautiful bouquet, and it looks like I've gone out to the garden and picked these stems. There's no right and wrong here, just be creative with what you have. So once you have the desired look, you can put your bouquet in your tin and leave it at this, but I like to go one step further. Here I'm just adding a few more of the white flowers just to help break up the color a little bit, but I also always love to add a touch of nature. So I have these branches that I collected, and I'm just going to stick a few sprigs in amongst my flowers. I just love this look so much. I think it makes a faux bouquet look a lot more realistic. And here we have this beautiful farmhouse garden inspired bouquet arrangement. I had this round of cardboard tubing, and it was left from a tape roll or ribbon. I actually can't even remember exactly, but it turns out that it fits over my hand. So I thought it would make a really cool base as a bracelet, but it was too chunky for my liking. So I'm just going to measure out about 1 inch all the way around using pencil, and you can see I've got it marked out here. And then I'm going to use a craft knife and cut through and follow that line that I created. So it does take a bit of pressure, but I was trying to be careful not to push too hard so that I ended up collapsing the tube. Okay, so now I have enough here that I could make two bracelets if I'd like. So I really like this size. The smaller one, I'm going to set that one aside. I'm going to give this tubing a coat of this warm white craft paint. I didn't want the brown craft paper color to show through my next layer, but of course this is just an option. You can do whatever you like. In fact, if you want, just painting straight onto this with a really cool pattern would be really neat. So I'm going to paint the inside and the outside and allow that to dry. While that's drying, I'm now going to prep my material. I had this scrap that was left from a project. It is a piece from a valance that I had purchased years ago for another project and I never ended up using it. So I've slowly been using this piece of fabric for some different projects. I just had to cut out the seam and then remove any of the threads that were left over. And now I'm going to cut this fabric down into a more manageable piece because I don't need a whole lot for this particular project. It's such a beautiful pattern. I am loving it. So I'm going to just wrap it around just to kind of see what part of the fabric pattern I want on my bracelet. I'm also going to just trim off the edges to make sure I've got some nice even edges to work with. I'm also going to be using this lace that I had in my lace stash. I'm going to apply it to the inside of my tubing. I wanted something like more decorative on the inside as well, and I actually kind of wish I used this on the outside as well, but I'll show you why here in a minute. First, we're just going to apply some of our fabric glue to the inside of the tubing, and then we're going to smooth it out and press the lace into that glue. You want to make sure you don't want like a heavy, thick layer of the glue because it will seep through the fabric and kind of give it a chunky look, and it's not what we're going for here. So I'm just going to slowly add my glue, spread it out, press the lace into place. I'm working in sections. I just find that it's a lot easier to do. I'd actually made another bracelet several years ago that was using scrap material, and I painted a cute little village scene on it, and I did some stitching, added some beading. It's one of my favorite pieces, so I thought it would be fun to create another handmade bracelet. So I'm really excited to share this one with you. So I'm just going to trim off the excess lace here now because I've got the inside all covered up, and now we can work on the outside. Just a note though, I did add just a little bit of extra glue on the seam to help prevent the fabric from fraying and just to help hold it all into place and give it a finished look. Surprisingly, the glue hasn't been taking too long to dry on all these pieces too. Okay, so back to our beautiful fabric. It is so pretty. It has a real vintage look to it too, and kind of a romantic look. So I'm just going to measure out the width that I have of my cardboard tube ring here. And then once you have that figured out, you can just cut your piece of material down into some more manageable strips that can wrap around the tubing. I am using a hard surface here, and I'm using this rotary cutter. This is actually from Dollar Tree, and it worked really well. I was quite happy with that. I'm also using a steel ruler here, and that just makes it so much easier to cut the fabric. So again, just going to cut this down some more. I ended up cutting, I think, one strip. It was too narrow, so I was frustrated with that, but it is what it is. You can see it's a little bit too narrow here. This one could be used for the other narrow tubing that I had cut down. So I really like that. Now I'm going to add my glue again, working in sections, just adding some of the adhesive and then spreading it out with my finger. And then you'll want to gently press the fabric into the glue, and you'll see how beautiful it looks against that cream color. I do like to trim off the edges just so I have a nice straight edge to start off with. So you can see how beautiful this is coming together. So as I'm coming up to the end here, I'm just making sure I add a little bit of glue to the edges. So I am going to take some little excess glue that I have on my finger, and I'm just going around the edge and applying that. That'll help to prevent it from fraying. Again, here I'm just trimming it off, and same thing, I'm just going to add just a little bit right to that seam to prevent it from coming apart and also fraying. So you're going to want to allow that to dry. Once dry, I've decided that I wanted to add just a little bit of a decorative touch, and I'm going to use these vintage buttons. They are kind of a plastic, or they are a plastic, but they are an older button. So I'm just going to remove the little circular piece at the back, and I needed to sand it down just a little bit to smooth that out. It's got kind of a vintage brass look, and it's got a beautiful rose pattern on it. I'm using a combination of some tacky glue and hot glue and applying those to the seam, and I really like how this looks, but this is where I wish I would have put some lace underneath, because you could see the seam of the cardboard tubing, but I'm still happy with how this looks. I just think it has such a romantic look to the piece. And of course, you could decorate it any way that you would like that would suit your style. I think a lot of us collect these paper bags that stores use, and they have their like business logo on it or stamped on it, or say a pattern that's on it that was from the printer. You can cover that up with some paint, or you could even glue some papers or some fabric onto it. Here I'm covering up this particular stamp. It was from a winery, and I just used some warm white paint. Here I've got this beautiful piece of stitching that my daughter had done years ago, and I thought it would be really, really pretty to use this to decorate a bag. So I'm just putting the excess aside. I'm going to save that for another project. I'm just going to, again, cut this down to size so it would fit into our painted area. Now I needed to paint over the stamp because the stamp was black, and since this fabric is light in color, I didn't want that stamp to show through. I also kind of just did a messy painting technique, as you see there. Again, just scrunched up the material, and I'm fraying the edges just to give a more casual, rustic look. And I have a little extra piece of fabric at the bottom there. We're going to be doing some stamping on that piece. So again, we're going to be using our fabric glue. If you want, you could add some more stitching to this around the edge, but I'm just going to use my glue. So I'm going to spread that out and use my finger to smooth it out, working in sections again. Working in sections allows you some working time so the glue doesn't set up too quickly. This is a great way to use any mementos that your kids have made in the past, or grandkids. You can just take little snippets and glue it onto a bag, and then you've got a very unique and beautiful gift bag to use. All right, so I've got these handmade stamps, and this one says handmade with a little rose on it, and I am going to use some green archival ink in fern green, and I'm just going to stamp it onto that little extra strip of fabric that I had set aside. A thinking of you or I love you sentiment would be a really nice touch as well. So I'm just going to apply that ink to this fabric and allow it just to set for a bit. And then again, you could add some stitching to this if you'd like. I'm just going to again add some glue to this and then press that down into place. So I still feel it needed a little bit of a decorative touch, so I'm going to add some of the fabric that matches this stitching fabric. Again, it's just a strip from my fabric scraps, and I also have this jute twine that matches some of the string that is in the embroidery. Again, I can't believe that my daughter made this. I just thought it was so cute, and I'm glad I saved it because it's perfect for a project like this. So I'm just going to tie the string and the fabric just in a loose knot. It's actually a single knot. And I'm going to add some more of the twine around the top. And I'm just going to create a simple loose loopy bow. And then it's ready to be used for any gift. So this project I've been wanting to do for a very long time, and I'm so excited to be able to share it with you. I'm using some Amazon packaging. I've seen lots of people reuse these. I'm going to use some hot glue just to seal up the envelope part and any other loose bits that may be showing. Next, I'm going to be using folding it in half, as you can see here. And then I'm going to be using some white gesso. I'm applying it all over, especially where you see the black. I'm not going to bother going right up to the edge, but I do want to make sure I cover up any of the wording or anything like that, because I don't want that to end up showing through our fabric that we are going to be applying. Now, you could just put a base layer of fabric and then add additional decorative fabrics over top, but I wanted to try using some gesso on here. Again, this has been something I've been wanting to do for a while. So here's our fabric scraps. I have got a beautiful selection that I have chosen to use on this project, and I just love the variation in colors. Now, I have had some people say, oh, why don't you give us some more variation in colors instead of having everything matching? Well, truth be told is I use these items personally, so I'm going to decorate these things in fabrics that I like, but of course, please feel free to use any of the fabrics that you love. So I'm going to cut these pieces down into a more useful size, and I'm going to also just trim them up and fray the edges as needed. I am going to just cut a selection of all these different fabrics that I had already shown you. Some of these fabrics are like old clothing that I had in my stash or from old projects as well. So now I have these beautiful dyed papers that I had created. Some of them are onion dyed, others are avocado dyed. If you want to see how I do that, please leave me a comment down in this comment section to let me know that you would like to see that tutorial. And I'll do my best to do that for you this summer. So I'm just folding these sheets in half. I have 4 sheets of each. Of course, depending on how thick of a signature you want to create will depend on how many sheets you add. But I find that 8 is a tolerable thickness. It's not too bulky. I'm loving these papers. It's got such a beautiful pattern on them. So now what I'm going to do is, once you've got all our sheets, this is printer paper, by the way. Once you've got them all folded in half, I'm going to do 1 sheet avocado, onion dyed, avocado, onion dyed, and so on. You could do this with coffee dyed paper, tea dyed paper, any color of dyed paper that you may have in your stash, or again, I could show you a tutorial. So we're going to just set this aside once we've got all those sheets of paper put together. This is all nice and dry now. So now we can start to apply our fabric strips using this card and a paintbrush, as well as our fabric glue. I have this really long strip again that was from a previous project. You've seen me using these strips a few times because I had several of them in my scrap basket. I want to make a tie to go around this, so I need one end to be slightly shorter than the other end. The other end is the end that's going to be wrapping around this, so you can see how it's offset. Once you've got the placement figured out, you're going to apply some of the fabric glue, and I'm going to use my paintbrush because I want this glue to be exactly underneath this little fabric scrap. So make sure you add enough so that your fabric will stick. And then I'm going to just gently place this into the glue. You don't want to stretch and pull on this fabric. You just want it to go into the glue naturally. So I just like to work on one side, and then I'm going to go over onto the other side and do the same process. I'm actually wondering, are any of you into making journals? I would love to know, because this is something I really, really enjoy, along with art journaling and mixed media art. So if you're interested in any of that, again, drop me a comment down in the comments section. All right, so back to our journal that we're making here. I am now going to be applying just placing some of our fabric scraps right onto our spine. I want to make sure I've got good coverage around the spine, and I'm going to have enough of it hanging off of the edge so I can wrap it around because I need a little extra strength there. I'm going to, again, apply our fabric glue, use our paintbrush to smooth it out, and then press the fabric into place. Again, I'm not going to pull the fabric taut. I need there to be some give. And the fabric glue actually remains flexible once it's dried. So keep in mind when you are using an adhesive that you are using one that is flexible as well. So again, I'm just going to continue here applying my glue until I've got all my fabrics into place on the spine, and apply some glue where our fabrics are going to be overlapping. Some of those spots you may be needing to use a little bit extra glue, just so you know. So I have the spine covered, and I'm going to make sure that it folds nicely. Now I'm just going to flip it over, and I'm going to just fold those ends around. And I'm just going to, again, just add some of my glue, not too much because I don't want it to get too bulky in around the spine. All right, so we have our spine all done. Now I'm going to just start to work on the placement of my fabrics. I just want to make sure I have enough pieces to cover my cover. Cover my cover. Yeah, anyways, so I did overlap or have an overhang on the bottom and the top, and I actually kind of wish I didn't do that, and you'll see why here in a moment. But I'm just going to continue to lay out my fabrics. I'm going to start off with one side, and then I will go ahead and work on the other side. Once you kind of have a general idea of the layout of your fabrics, you can kind of pull them off, and then you can start to apply your glue and your fabrics. Again, you want to make sure they're overlapping. I'm trying to create kind of a loose quilted look, just a really relaxed one. You can, again, add some stitching, and I will show you an example of some stitching that I had done on another journal that I was working on. Here, I'm just going to trim off any of the pieces that are kind of, I don't know, not straight enough. I didn't want them to be too crooked because it kind of looks funny. I don't know. Just it looked a little awkward to my eye. Also on the edges where the ties are, I do have my fabrics butting right up to the edge, but I am fraying the edges of all my fabrics. Okay, so now you're going to see me just pull up my fabrics, and I'm just setting them into off to the side, kind of roughly in the area where I am going to be gluing them. Again, these actually don't end up going back onto my cover the way I had them laid out originally. You can take a picture of the original layout that you've got set up and then follow that if you'd like, but as long as you get the cover covered with the fabrics you've chosen, then you'll be all right. So I'm going to start to apply my glue, and I'm going to press the fabrics into place, again, not pulling the pieces taut. And I'm going to make sure that I overlap these fabrics as well and fray any of the edges that are going to be showing. All right, so I have the one side all covered up. I'm flipping it over, and I'm going to glue down the overhang that I have, but this is where I actually should have just trimmed them off, and I'll show you why I should have trimmed them off here in a moment. But we are going to now, again, flip it back over, and we're going to work on that opposite side to create the same look you can see here. So I still felt like it needed a bit more, so I'm just going to add some pieces of lace. I'm just going to lay them into place. I'm going to decide if I want the white or the off-white that I have. The off-white has a bit of a sheen to it, so I wasn't sure how it would look. You can see that here. And then this one is the white, and I preferred the white. So I'm just going to, again, use my fabric glue and go right over the fabric and put some of these pieces of lace that I have cut out into place. I don't know, I just like the look, and I felt like it also helped to break up some of that pink, but allowing a bit of that pink to show through. So I have all that fabric in place. Now I'm gonna put a heavy board that's nice and flat along with some added weight. I'm using some paper pads that I had and allowing that all to set. Once set, this is where I'm like, okay, I'm going to use some gesso and cover up all that fabric that's hanging over, or sorry, that was hanging over. And this is when I realized that I should have just trimmed them off because I could have skipped this step. But I didn't think about it at the time. So if you do this, then I would recommend that you just trim them off. But you also have the option of using gesso to cover up that color. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I'm going to be adding some fabric to the inside, and that color was showing through and it looked really, really funny. So I allowed that to dry. Now again, I'm using my fabric glue. This time I'm using a paintbrush as well as a card. This is the fabric scrap that I'm using. It's a scrap of some eyelet lace. It's an off-white, and it was the perfect width and height for this book. I just needed to trim off any excess I may have. So I'm using a paintbrush to apply the glue to the edge. So I made sure I got it right up to the edge. And then I'm going to apply some glue using the card all over this panel, as you can see me doing right here. This allows me to give some really, really good coverage all over without too much glue or any like thick gloppy spots that will soak through the fabric, because it will show. So I'm going to push my fabric into the glue. And again, I'm not pulling tight because I don't want this to end up stretching our paper, or like, I need it to be able to fold properly. So if you don't pull on it, then it will still fold properly. So I did one side, and now I'm just going to work on the other side, and same thing, add the glue the same way I did before, and then press your fabric into place. And then I'm going to just make sure that it can still fold up properly. And here I'm just going to first cut off the excess fabric. And again, you can save that for another project. Add it to that stash of fabric that you have. I'm adding some weight and allowing that to, again, dry well. You can see here it still folds nicely, and I'm having no issues. I'm going to just trim off a little bit on the edge, and then I'm going to fray it. I do kind of want a little bit hanging over because I really like that look, but of course do what you like. Now we're going to add our paper. So I've got this elastic string in my stash, but you can also use a headband. I'm going to show you what it would look like with my headband. This headband ended up being just a little bit too small for this particular journal, so you could cut down the journal a little bit up beforehand if you need to, but I still just wanted to show you what that looked like. And now I'll show you what it looks like with the string as well. So all you're doing is adding your elastic to the middle, just like you see me doing here, and you would do the same with the headband. But with the string, I do need to tie my own knot. The headband, they already had welded the two ends together. So I'm just gonna pull my ends a little bit tight here so I can create a knot, and there won't be too much slack, which is what you want. But you don't want it so tight that our journal will buckle on us. So that's what I was finding was happening with the headband on this particular piece. But this works great right now. So I'm just going to trim off the ends, and now all you have to do is slip your pages so that the middle of your signatures or your pages will be underneath the elastic, and it makes for a super easy journal. So before you finish this up, like I said, you could add some stitching, machine stitching like I did here, but you can just leave it as is like we've done here. You could also stitch your signatures into your booklet I love this. I am so happy with how it turned out. Let me know what you think down below. And I also would like to know if you've made anything like this before. If you still have lots of fabric scraps to use up, then check this playlist out here to the right. I want to thank you all so much for joining me today, and we will see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.